It was a crisp, quiet evening when Erica Carter, the respected director of the FBI's Eastern Division, drove her black sedan down a desolate stretch of road on her way home. The day had been long, filled with meetings and critical decisions, and she was looking forward to nothing more than kicking off her heels and curling up with a good book. The twilight sky was fading into darkness, and Erica found comfort in the gentle hum of her car engine. As she approached a curve in the road, a flash of red and blue lights lit up her rearview mirror, breaking her calm. A sharp chirp of a siren followed. Erica's eyebrows furrowed in confusion. She hadn't been speeding, her turn signals had been used meticulously, and her seatbelt was fastened. Everything about her driving was by the book. She muttered under her breath, "What now?" Erica glanced around. There were no other cars on the road, and the streetlights were sparse. Taking a deep breath, she pulled over to the side of the road and came to a stop. She reached for her driver's license and registration from the glove compartment, her movements deliberate and calm. Years of experience and her identity as a black woman in America had taught her to approach situations like this with caution. Moments later, a figure emerged from the flashing patrol car. A tall, broad-shouldered white officer in his mid-40s approached her vehicle. His stride was slow, almost calculated, and the faintest trace of suspicion was etched on his face. His name tag read, Officer Daniel Hayes. Erica rolled down her window and offered a professional smile. "Good evening, officer. Is there a problem?" Her tone was polite but firm, her years of leadership apparent even in casual conversation. Hayes leaned down slightly, shining his flashlight into her face before saying curtly, "License and registration." Erica handed the documents through the window and asked, "Could you tell me why I've been pulled over?" Hayes squinted at her license and then back at her. "Your car looks out of place around here. Thought I'd check it out." Her brow arched. "Out of place," she repeated, her tone carefully measured. "I don't believe that's a valid reason to stop me." Hayes straightened, his demeanor hardening. "Look, I don't have to explain myself to you. Just sit tight." Erica's calm facade remained unshaken, but internally frustration simmered. "Officer Hayes," she said evenly, "you're required by law to provide a reason for this stop. I've complied with your request, but I have every right to question why you've detained me." Hayes's jaw tightened. He leaned closer to the window, his voice dropping to a threatening tone. "You seem awfully mouthy for someone who's supposed to be following orders." A flicker of tension sparked in Erica's chest, but she refused to let it show. Her hands remained firmly on the steering wheel. "With respect, officer," she said calmly, "I am following orders, but I'm also aware of my rights." Hayes let out a frustrated sigh, tapping his flashlight against the roof of her car. "People like you always think you're above the rules." Erica's fingers tightened slightly on the wheel, but she didn't rise to the bait. "People like me?" she asked, her tone steady but laced with quiet defiance. Hayes stepped back slightly, motioning for her to roll her window down further. "Step out of the vehicle," he barked. Erica's eyes narrowed. "Unless you can provide a valid reason for detaining me, I'm afraid I must decline." The air grew heavier with tension. For a moment, Hayes seemed unsure of how to proceed. But then, his hand moved to the holster at his side, his fingers brushing against the handle of his firearm. "Don't make me repeat myself," he growled. In that moment, Erica realized this was no longer a routine stop. This was a test of her composure, her courage, and her unyielding belief in justice. The cold night air seeped into the car through the partially open window, but Erica Carter's resolve remained firm. Her gaze locked on Officer Daniel Hayes, who now stood just inches away from her car, his hand hovering over his holstered firearm. The tension between them crackled like static electricity, and Erica's instincts, honed over years in law enforcement, told her to tread carefully. "Step out of the car," Hayes ordered again, his voice louder this time. His posture was rigid, his stance aggressive. Erica exhaled slowly, keeping her hands firmly on the wheel. "Officer Hayes, I've complied with your request for my license and registration. I've asked for a valid reason for this stop, and you haven't provided one. I don't feel safe stepping out of this vehicle without justification." Hayes's face darkened. "Not safe?" he sneered. "You think I'm some kind of threat? Lady, you've got nothing to worry about. unless you keep running your mouth. The flashlight in his hand swept over her interior, lingering unnecessarily on her bag in the passenger seat. His eyes narrowed as if searching for an excuse to escalate the situation. "You carrying anything illegal in here?" he asked, his tone dripping with suspicion. "Drugs? Weapons?" Erica's jaw tightened, but her voice remained calm. "No, officer, I am not." Hayes smirked, his confidence growing as he leaned closer to the window. "Funny, people like you usually have something to hide." The blatant insinuation made Erica's stomach churn, but she refused to let him see it. She straightened in her seat, her voice taking on a sharper edge. "Officer Hayes, I suggest you choose your words carefully. I am a law-abiding citizen, and I expect to be treated as such." But her calm professionalism only seemed to irritate Hayes further. His hand now rested firmly on the grip of his gun, his knuckles turning white. "This isn't a negotiation," he snapped. "I'm not going to stand here and let you tell me how to do my job. Get out of the car, now!" The command hung in the air like a threat. Erica's mind raced. She could see that Hayes was teetering on the edge of control, and any sudden movement might push him over. Slowly, she raised her hands off the wheel, keeping them visible. "Officer Hayes," she said, her tone steady but firm, "you're making a mistake. This entire interaction is being recorded." She gestured with a nod toward her dashboard-mounted phone. "Your words, your actions, they're all on video." For the first time, Hayes hesitated. His eyes flicked toward the phone, then back to Erica. But instead of backing down, his expression twisted into a scowl. "You think a video's gonna scare me?" he spat. "I've been on the force for 15 years. I know how this works. People like you don't get the upper hand." Erica's heart pounded, but she refused to break eye contact. "This isn't about the upper hand," she said calmly. "This is about accountability." Hayes's patience snapped. In one swift motion, he drew his gun and pointed it directly at her through the open window. "I said, get out of the car," he shouted, his voice trembling with a mix of rage and nerves. Erica froze. Her years of training kicked in, every fiber of her being urging her to stay still. She raised her hands higher, palms facing outward in a universal gesture of compliance. "Officer Hayes," she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. "This is an abuse of power. Lower your weapon and we can resolve this calmly." But Hayes wasn't listening. His face was red with fury, his breathing uneven. "You don't get to tell me what to do," he yelled. "I'm in charge here, not you." From the corner of her eye, Erica caught the faint glimmer of approaching headlights. A vehicle was coming down the road, and she prayed it wasn't just another passerby. "Help is on the way," she said quietly, more to herself than to Hayes. "This ends now." The headlights grew brighter, and soon the familiar sound of a siren pierced the night. A second patrol car pulled up behind Hayes's vehicle, its blue and red lights flashing in the darkness. The driver's door opened, and a tall figure stepped out, his authoritative presence immediately commanding attention. "Officer Hayes," the newcomer barked, his voice sharp and unmistakably in control. "What the hell is going on here?" Hayes turned, startled, his gun lowering slightly. "Sheriff Whitaker," he stammered, his bravado faltering. Erica stayed silent, her hands still raised as she watched the scene unfold. For the first time that night, she allowed herself a flicker of hope. The figure approaching from the second patrol car was unmistakable. Sheriff Michael Whitaker, a seasoned law enforcement officer with years of experience under his belt. His sharp eyes scanned the scene, quickly assessing the tension in the air. Erica Carter remained seated in her car, her hands raised in plain view, while Officer Daniel Hayes stood stiffly by her window, his gun still partially drawn. "Hayes," Whitaker said firmly, his voice cutting through the night like a knife. "Put the gun down, now!" Hayes hesitated, his jaw tightening as his grip on the weapon faltered. He glanced at Whitaker, then back at Erica, as though trying to justify his actions. "Sir, she wasn't cooperating," he began, his tone defensive. "I asked her to step out of the vehicle multiple times, but she refused. She was being—" "Hayes," Whitaker interrupted, his voice sharper this time. "I don't want excuses. Lower your weapon immediately." Reluctantly, Hayes complied, sliding his gun back into its holster. He stepped back from the car, his posture tense and defensive. Whitaker's gaze shifted to Erica, who had yet to move from her seat. "Ma'am," the sheriff said, his tone softening slightly. "Are you all right?" Erica lowered her hand slowly, her eyes meeting Whitaker's, with a mixture of relief and steel determination. "I'm fine," she said, her voice calm but firm. "But this officer's conduct has been anything but professional. He pulled me over without cause, refused to provide an explanation, and escalated the situation to this point." Whitaker's brow furrowed as he turned back to Hayes. "Is that true?" "She wouldn't cooperate," Hayes blurted out, his frustration bubbling over. "She kept questioning me, filming everything, trying to intimidate me. I was following protocol." "Protocol?" Whitaker snapped, his voice rising. "Since when does protocol involve pointing a gun at an unarmed civilian sitting in her car? Do you even realize who you're talking to?" Hayes blinked, his confusion evident. I don't..." Whitaker sighed heavily, rubbing his temples before turning back to Erica. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but could you confirm your identity for the record?" Erica nodded, her composure unshaken. "Erica Carter, Director of the FBI's Eastern Division." The color drained from Hayes' face. His mouth opened as if to speak, but no words came out. Whitaker's eyes widened slightly, but he quickly recovered, nodding in acknowledgement. "Director Carter," Whitaker said, his tone respectful, "on behalf of this department, I deeply apologize for what's happened here tonight. I assure you this will be dealt with immediately." Erica leaned slightly out of her window, her gaze fixed on Hayes. "Sheriff Whitaker," she said, her voice steady, "this isn't just about me. It's about the way power is being abused on your watch. This officer didn't see me as a person. He saw me as a threat simply because I dared to question him." Whitaker's jaw tightened. He turned back to Hayes, his expression hard as steel. "Hayes, hand over your badge and your weapon. You're done." "Sir, wait," Hayes stammered, panic creeping into his voice. "I didn't know. She didn't..." "Enough," Whitaker barked, silencing him. "You've crossed a line, Hayes. More than one. And now, you're going to answer for it." Two additional officers from the 2nd Patrol car approached cautiously. Whitaker gestured toward Hayes. "Escort him back to the station. He's suspended effective immediately, pending a full investigation." The officers nodded, stepping forward to take Hayes into custody. The man's face was a mix of anger and fear as they led him toward the 2nd Patrol car. He glanced back at Erica, his eyes full of resentment, but she didn't flinch. Once Hayes was out of earshot, Whitaker turned back to Erica. "Director Carter, I assure you this isn't how we operate. Hayes' actions are inexcusable, and I will personally see to it that justice is served." Erica stepped out of her car, her posture tall and commanding. She faced Whitaker directly, her voice steady. "Sheriff Whitaker, I appreciate your intervention tonight, but this isn't just about one officer. Incidents like this are part of a larger problem, a culture that allows unchecked authority and implicit bias to thrive. If you truly want to make this right, you'll need to address that too." Whitaker nodded solemnly. "You're absolutely right. This department will cooperate fully with any investigation you deem necessary, and I'll do everything in my power to ensure this doesn't happen again." Erica's gaze softened slightly, but her resolve remained unshaken. "Good," she said simply, "because this won't end here." As Whitaker signaled the remaining officers to secure the scene, Erica returned to her car. The adrenaline still coursed through her veins, but she felt a sense of clarity. This wasn't just a personal fight. It was a battle for accountability and justice. As she drove away, she glanced at the dashboard camera, still recording. She would use every second of that footage to shine a light on the abuse of power she had faced. This was only the beginning. The morning after the incident, Erica Carter sat in her office at FBI headquarters, replaying the dashboard camera footage on her computer. Every word, every action, every moment of Officer Hayes' misconduct was there, undeniable and unaltered. Her face remained calm, but her mind was racing. This wasn't just a personal affront. It was a glaring example of systemic issues that needed to be addressed. Her assistant, Jenna Walsh, knocked lightly on the door before stepping in. "Director Carter, the media is already catching wind of last night's events," she said, holding a tablet that displayed several news headlines. Erica glanced at the tablet, where words like FBI director involved in traffic stop altercation and Abuse of power or justified action? Flashed across the screen. She let out a small sigh, leaning back in her chair. Call the public affairs office, Erica instructed. I want a press conference scheduled for this afternoon. And contact Sheriff Whitaker. I want to know the status of Officer Hayes' suspension and the internal investigation. Yes, ma'am, Jenna replied, immediately leaving the room to carry out the orders. By noon, the conference room was packed with journalists, their cameras and microphones aimed squarely at Erica as she stood behind the podium. The room buzzed with anticipation, the air thick with unspoken questions. Erica surveyed the crowd, her expression resolute. Good afternoon, she began, her voice firm but measured. As many of you are aware, last night I was involved in an incident during a routine traffic stop. What transpired was not only an abuse of power by a law enforcement officer, but also a reflection of a broader issue that continues to plague our society: the misuse of authority and the role of implicit bias in policing. The room fell silent as she continued, her words precise and unflinching. Let me be clear, this is not just about me. I am fortunate enough to have a platform and the resources to address what happened. But there are countless individuals who face similar situations every day. Individuals who do not have the same privileges or protections. This incident is a reminder that we must hold ourselves and those in positions of power accountable for their actions. She gestured toward the table beside her, where a laptop was connected to a projector. I have submitted this footage to the appropriate oversight bodies, as well as to Sheriff Whitaker's department. I will now play a portion of that footage for you. The room watched in silence as the video played on the screen. Hayes' aggressive tone, his refusal to provide a reason for the stop, and his eventual decision to draw his weapon all unfolded before their eyes. Gasps rippled through the crowd, followed by the furious sound of reporters typing and murmuring to one another. When the video ended, Erica faced the crowd once more. This is what happens when power goes unchecked, but this is not where it ends. I have spoken with Sheriff Whitaker, and I have been assured that Officer Hayes has been suspended, pending a full investigation. However, this is not enough. We need systemic reform. We need better training, better oversight, and better accountability within our law enforcement agencies. A reporter raised her hand, her voice cutting through the stillness. Director Carter, do you believe this incident was racially motivated? Erica paused, choosing her words carefully. What I believe is that biases, whether explicit or implicit, often play a role in how individuals are treated. This incident may be rooted in those biases, but the investigation will reveal the full truth. What matters now is that we address these issues head-on, not just as an isolated incident, but as part of a systemic problem. Another reporter stood up, his voice urgent. Do you intend to pursue legal action against Officer Hayes? Erica's gaze was steady. That decision will depend on the outcome of the investigation. What I intend to do, without question, is ensure that justice is served, not just for myself, but for anyone who has ever been subjected to similar abuse. By the time the press conference ended, the story had already made national headlines. Calls flooded into Erica's office from civil rights organizations, lawmakers, and even fellow law enforcement leaders offering their support. It was clear that this case had struck a nerve. Later that evening, Erica received an update from Sheriff Whitaker. Director Carter, he said over the phone, his voice weary but sincere, we've officially launched an internal investigation. Officer Hayes will be interviewed tomorrow, and we've turned over his record for review. It's not pretty. This isn't his first complaint for misconduct. Erica's lips pressed into a thin line. I appreciate your transparency, Sheriff. I hope this investigation doesn't stop with Hayes. This is a chance to address the culture that allowed someone like him to thrive in your department. Whitaker sighed heavily. You're right. We've got a long road ahead, but I promise you, we're taking this seriously. Erica hung up the phone, staring out the window of her office. The city lights glimmered in the distance, a reminder of the lives she was fighting to protect. This wasn't just about accountability, it was about changing the system itself. As she sat back in her chair, she knew the road ahead would be difficult, but if she could use her position to shine a light on injustice, then every sleepless night, every tough decision, and every confrontation would be worth it. 2 months after the fateful night on the roadside, Erica Carter walked into a crowded courtroom. The buzz of reporters, activists, and citizens filled the space, all eager to see justice unfold. At the defendant's table sat Daniel Hayes, visibly tense and far removed from the arrogant officer she had encountered that night. The trial had garnered national attention, not just because of Erica's position as the FBI's Eastern Division Director, but because it symbolized a larger battle against systemic abuse of power. Over the weeks leading up to the trial, Erica had worked tirelessly with her legal team, submitting evidence, including the video from her dashboard camera, and preparing to testify. The prosecutor began with the facts. Hayes had pulled Erica over without probable cause, escalated the situation unnecessarily, and ultimately drawn his weapon on an unarmed civilian who posed no threat. Video evidence and witness testimonies painted a damning picture of Hayes' conduct, and his defense attorney struggled to frame his actions as anything other than gross misconduct. When it was Erica's turn to take the stand, she spoke with precision and clarity. "This was not a misunderstanding," she said, her voice resonating through the courtroom. "This was a deliberate abuse of power. Officer Hayes saw me not as a person, but as someone he could intimidate and control. If I didn't have my position, my knowledge of the law, and the means to record that interaction, who knows how this might have ended?" Hayes avoided her gaze, staring down at the table. His attorney tried to argue that he had acted out of stress, but the jury wasn't convinced. The evidence was too compelling, and Erica's calm yet resolute testimony left no room for doubt. The deliberation was brief. When the jury returned, the foreperson announced the verdict: guilty. Hayes was convicted of multiple charges, including abuse of power, unlawful detainment, and endangering the life of a civilian. The judge sentenced him to 4 years in prison, along with mandatory participation in anti-bias training and a permanent ban from law enforcement. As the sentence was read, a wave of relief and applause rippled through the courtroom. For many, this wasn't just justice for Erica. It was a step forward in the fight against police misconduct. After the trial, Erica stood outside the courthouse, addressing a sea of cameras and microphones. Today's verdict is a reminder that no one is above accountability, but this is just the beginning. It's not enough to punish individuals. We must address the culture and systems that allow these abuses to happen. Real change will only come when we demand more from those entrusted to protect us. The aftermath of the case sparked a national dialogue. Police departments across the country began reviewing their policies and implementing mandatory training programs to address implicit bias and de-escalation tactics. Erica worked closely with lawmakers and civil rights organizations to advocate for reforms, ensuring the momentum wasn't lost. For Hayes, the consequences were not just legal, but personal. The conviction and media attention left him ostracized, a stark reminder of the costs of abusing power. Though Erica knew this victory didn't solve everything, it reinforced her belief in the importance of persistence. Change was slow, often frustrating, but every step forward mattered. As she left the courthouse that day, Erica glanced at the crowd, faces filled with hope, determination, and gratitude. She had stood up not just for herself, but for countless others who couldn't. And for the first time in a long time, she felt that the scales of justice, though imperfect, were beginning to balance.